Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Okay, hopefully everyone is able to see the screen.
Yeah, I can see
I added the topic here. I just wanted to follow up on the conversation we had last week, where there were some suggestions to add some more details in the table, and I added that. I'm hoping to see or get more feedback on those details, flesh out those a little bit more, so I can go towards the high fidelity mocks for this, and then we can close to wrap up this design. So let me jump here. For folks who didn't join last week, Issues Dashboard is a feature currently in Konflux that UX is designing for. The goal is to create these automated issues based on the system failures, and then show it in Konflux in a format that user can consume. This is sort of a landing view for Issues Dashboard. We show some health. We can figure this out, how this works, but we can user can see the issues by severity, some of the latest issues by the statuses. So there is some details here on the dashboard. And when user click on see more, see all issues or more issues, they get to this page. There is a filter available on the top to be able to filter the issues based on the importance and priority for the user. Could be status, severity, scope, anything else. And then in the table here, the scope didn't have a hyperlink. So last time I added a hyperlink, and then when user selects the link, some details open up here. So we had a conversation about how this a particular issue that could arise based on the failures from several resources or maybe components or applications. And then I think we were discussing the rolling up of that issue or some of those failures into a single issue. I just wanted to open this up and see what details we want to see when user selects to see more details about that or affected resources, what information is useful. I think we're also talking about a single log file versus a consolidated log file for all the related failures. Are we rolling up the statuses up here into single? So I just wanted to sort of do a little bit of brainstorming to see if we can arrive at the data elements that we want to present, and then so I can go ahead and update the mocks that can then be forwarded to the dev team for implementation. Anyone have any thoughts, ideas, or any details that we should sort of use or fill this in the expanded view?
Well, I guess I'll just say first that I like it. We talked last time. I think that the view log file for the consolidated item, like the update to dependency updates, like that link, I think can't make sense. At least I don't know what it would link to.
Okay.
Because if you've got 5 different logs or 4 different logs for your 4 different affected resources, I don't know how we're going to combine those 4 logs into one log.
Okay.
That you might see. If somebody has a bright idea for how to do that, let's do it. But
Go ahead, Lou.
Yeah, sorry if this was already mentioned. I just tuned in now. The created on and status and reason, does it make sense to have that at the group level? Because I would imagine if you know the what's the name of the thing that creates the issues? What are we calling those?
I think they're monitors.
Yeah, if a monitor is generating those individual items, right? And if one is created today, I mean, we can take like the oldest date for created on, but I don't know how relevant that will be. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that created on should be on each one of the individual items.
Okay.
As opposed to because depending on how things are created, it might just not be that useful to have, you know, when was the first one created for this group. I don't know if that is very useful.
Okay, let me go back here 1 second. So let's say this is not expanded. And I mean, we see the scope that it is affecting multiple resources. What do we want to see here? So if that created on, let's say we move it to the individual affected resources, we don't want to, I'm assuming we don't want to show anything up here when it is rolled up, right? Or should we just take the latest one? I think this is where I could use some guidance. Well, how are the monitors reporting it, and what do we want to show to the user when they land on this view before they expand?
Right.
What happens to the status? What happens to the severity? Are these, again, individual severities or statuses? That's the wrong column. It should say severity, but yeah. Are they individual severities for each of those affected resource, or how is it rolling out?
I think, and this probably needs some, experimentation to figure out what best works here. But an alternative to created on could be updated on. So like you would know when was which one was the newest issues that I have seen. That might be more useful than when was it first reported.
Okay.
Just an idea, but I think maybe experimenting might be the best way around this.
Okay, good.
Plus one on experimenting. I was thinking, as a user, I might like to see 2 columns with 2 dates, although it might get a little crowded. And the first date might be, created on or first seen.
Okay.
Date. This is when the issue had started happening. And then maybe a second column could be like last observed on. This is too wordy, but it's like the most recent time that one of these 4 components experienced the issue. And that gives me like a kind of way to understand quickly, oh man, that issue's been going on for 2 weeks. And it happened as recently as today. Like that's right away. That's kind of useful information to me, I think.
Okay.
But it would get crowded in the real estate. Maybe is the reason column and the issue name column on the left. I wonder when will those be like meaningfully different? And like right now they have different text in the 2 sides, but they kind of say the same thing 2 different ways. So maybe we could or should drop one of those to buy ourselves a little horizontal real estate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think Ralph, you also mentioned that maybe having an individual file or log file for looking at the log details for that resource could make sense. So if we don't need it at the higher level, we could sort of move it on more details.
Yeah.
So that column could also come off.
Yeah. A trade-off here just to think about is the very, very first one in the table at the top has only 1 component.
Yeah.
And if most of the issues only ever affect one thing, then as a user, it's kind of annoying that I have to click to expand before I can get to the log. But we don't know how many, like it's like in practice, how many will be a single resource thing versus how many will be a multi-resource thing. And to Louis' point, experimentation will help us know better about that.
Ralph, I think you brought up another topic here around expanding the scope. So let's say this particular issue started with 5 applications, and then any underlying service continued to fail as new commits are being committed to different components or applications. This could expand. So it started with 5, and then based on the service failures, it is expanding to 6, 7. So is that something that can happen? Or that do we need to consider that use case? So I can show an example of this where we started with 1 failure and now it is expanded to 2 or 3 or 4 based on continuing unavailability of certain service.
Yeah, I don't know how to raise my hand. I think that'll definitely happen. Like look at the row above it, the enterprise contract failed.
Yeah.
It might be that the platform administrators roll out a new enterprise contract policy change that we didn't intend to break everybody on the cluster, but we did. Yeah. And in that case, a user is only going to notice when they update their first component, and it's going to say 1 component is failing enterprise contract, but then a couple of hours later, they try to update another one in a pull request, and they're going to learn that 2 of them are failing enterprise contracting, and so on, and that'll grow over time.
So do we think that the monitor will be able to catch that and in real time we update that information here? So when user looks at it, last time they saw maybe there were 2 applications now, or 2 resources failed, now there will be 4 or 5, or as they continue to update, this number changes.
I think that's what Adam said last week, that the monitor is responsible for deduplicating events and deduplicating issues, and updating an issue with additionally impacted resources.
Okay. And then another thing here, this is the column name, but if this is a severity, and if this row in its collapsed form shows the severity of these issues is critical, again, sort of other things that we're talking about, does the individual failure has its own severity and then that rolls up here, or we sort of assign one severity that if there's a service failure, that service failure itself is severe, and then now other components are being affected, so they don't really roll up, but that one unexpanded row has a severity?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I think like when would it ever be different across the affected components? If the monitor needs to figure that out automatically, then there's got to be some sort of like severity or like importance information about the different resources in the first place.
Yeah.
So if you have like 5 components, and if stuff fails on 2 of them, it's only normal. But it's only when you get to the 3rd component suddenly things become critical. We would need to somehow be able to mark that component as a critical component, and we don't have that information in the system.
Okay.
So that leads me to believe that the severity is only ever going to be a kind of top level item.
Okay, got it. Okay, so then I can take this off for now. Are we tracking the statuses for each of these? If automatically, let's say the issue is fixed, and then one by one the services or components start to come back online, and then they change from open to resolve?
That's a good question. Because I can imagine that definitely happening. Yeah, you start failing on 3 components, and maybe one of the components starts passing, and so it's no longer an affected resource. The issue's not resolved because the other 3 components are still affected. Yeah, I don't know if that exists in the data model, but that sounds like that would need to be a part of it.
Okay.
And like the issue itself could be auto-resolved only when its list of affected resources gets back down to 0.
Okay. Yeah. So I think then the issue can open at this highest level until that time, and then when it starts to be resolved automatically.
Well, I wonder if the user would want to see like what if you had a bunch of affected resources, and then over time some of those affected resources start becoming resolved. When you look at this list, do you want to see the full original list with some of them still in like, in normal blue text, but others of them crossed out or with some sort of check mark to indicate this resource was affected by this issue, but is no longer affected by this issue?
Yeah.
Or do you want to see it just disappeared from the list?
I think that's a good question. I don't know if we have talked about any archival policies, like what issues will be archived at what point, like how long they stay on in the list until they are archived, and then they move to archived list. Johnny, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about the issues being resolved. Like, for example, one of the rows here is that your release failed. I mean, that's never going to be resolved. The release is a one-time run. I mean, we're never going to see it release that finish and then be like, oh, your next one passed for that application. Like, that's just not in the data model, like how the operator works at all.
Okay.
But I don't understand how, like, enterprise contract fails, another one. Like, are you going to rerun the same exact snapshot enterprise contract and somehow find the previous one? I don't understand how the resolving part works for this.
The implementation, this is a dodge at first, but then I'll talk about it, is that it's up to the individual monitors. If there's like a monitor that's responsible for creating the release issues, it's responsible for understanding what it would mean to automatically resolve the release issue. But like what I as a user, what I would expect, or maybe, I don't know, what I would expect is that if the latest release attempt has failed, then an issue is created for it. And as soon as you get a successful release, then the issue is resolved. Your releases are working now for application Y. And I think same with if your builds are failing on pull requests, no issue created. That's just like your pull requests are failing. But if your post-merge builds are failing, that an issue should be created for that and should persist until you finally get successful post-merge builds, at which point like you've fixed main for your app.
Okay, I mean, that makes more sense. It is, so would this be something that like the dashboard backend is figuring out, or is this on the operators themselves to send, hey, main is resolved now? Because I don't know how the operators would know that, you know, the last 6 things for main failed and this is the first one that actually worked.
We got to go check the doc. But like Adam was proposing an architecture for monitors, and that for any issue that we would want to appear in the dashboard, a monitor needs to be written for that issue. So for the releases, for example, it's not necessarily the release service controller, although I suppose it could be, but it's some controller that's dedicated to creating this release style issue, and all the business logic about when to create them and when to resolve them belongs in it. But it's not I don't think it's the issue dashboard backend's responsibility. It just has a list of issues and is rendering them, but other things are responsible for creating and resolving the issues.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Any other comments, thoughts, or questions?
I say just because of that architecture, like we can imagine launching the issue dashboard and only having one monitor implemented for, let's say it's the mintmaker failed issue that we see at the bottom of the screen. It might be the only issue for some time until we've identified a good second monitor to add, and we add that monitor. The ones that we see here, maybe not all of them are implemented for a while or ever, but we do it based on user feedback and our own experience using the system.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I will go ahead and make updates based on some of the conversations we had today, and then put all of these in the some sort of a design doc where various illustrations can help see how these things can work, and then can be circulated to get feedback. So Adam can finalize the design, the data model, the data that needs to support the implementation, and then they can figure out a plan for implementation. Thank you for all the feedback. That's all I had today.
You had a question in the side about, do we need to do integration with Slack or Jira, Pankaj? And like, for me as a user, I think I would want an integration with Jira or GitHub issues, so that like if my app is failing, I don't have to go to the Konflux UI. Instead, I get things in my backlog that I'm using to track my work. But that is not like an MVP feature. We should like defer that out until after we built the dashboard and people have used it, and we see if it's as useful as we hoped it was, and then we can look at integrations like that.
Certainly. Okay, thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Pankaj. There's nothing else on the agenda for today. Any other topics anyone wants to add or bring up? Announcements? Anything to share? Okay, if not, then let's close it. Thank you, Pankaj. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.